The Gates of Ankh-Kirash. The disturbance in Ankh-Kirash was noticed immediately. Druid outposts in Silithus fell under attack from swarms of Silithid and Kiraji. The desperate cries for help were heard by both the Horde and the Alliance, who sent many to aid them in the land's defense. Soon the truth of the insectoid aggression was revealed by the bronze dragonflight. Anachronos, a dragon who fought the Kiraji centuries ago, sensed that Cthulhu had awoken. There was no doubt that only the old god itself could have launched such a war against Azeroth, but this was a sliver of Cthulhu's potential. The old god had been imprisoned for too long. It needed time to gather its full strength. Once it did, Anachronos did not believe that any army in the world would be able to stop the entity. War Chief Thrall and Regent Lord Bolvar Fordragon, acting on Anduin Wryn's behalf, quickly came to an unprecedented agreement. Both factions would combine the might of their armies to strike back against the threat of Cthulhu. Varrock Saurfang, a seasoned orc warrior, was granted command of the campaign. Together, the heroes of Azeroth stood strong against the tides of Kiraji and Silithid, but the insectoids seemed to have endless numbers. Eventually, they would win the war of attrition. The Horde and the Alliance's only hope of victory was striking into the heart of Ankh-Kirash and challenging the old god directly. No one knew if it was possible to defeat Cthulhu, but there was no alternative, and no shortage of volunteers. The scarab wall around Ankh-Kirash was impenetrable. The only instrument capable of opening it had been destroyed, its pieces scattered across the world. The champions of Azeroth scoured the continents for fragments of this artifact, the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. They gathered each shard until finally it had been assembled. Varrock Saurfang marched his armies to the gates of Ankh-Kirash and decreed that the scepter be used. The gates flung open. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing a seemingly endless tide of Kiraji against the forces of Azeroth. Countless heroes fell to the insectoids that day, but the line did not bend, and it did not break. The bulk of Cthulhu's armies had just been matched. And when they crumbled, the way into Ankh-Kirash was finally open. Varrock wasted little time. He had no intention of letting an old god regain its footing and spawn a new army. He ordered a dual strike upon Cthulhu's forces. The first attack would raid the ruins of Ankh-Kirash, which held the bulk of the Kiraji. Varrock knew the insectoids would show no mercy. He deployed his most elite Horde champions in this fight, believing that only they could endure such a brutal battle. While the Horde held a line against the Kiraji, the Alliance would storm beneath Ankh-Kirash. They would not face swarms of insectoids, but they would fight Cthulhu's most powerful minions, and they would confront the old god itself. With the Horde occupying the Kiraji army above, the Alliance soldiers descended into the maw of madness. The whispers of Cthulhu slithered into their minds, seeking to turn them against one another. And yet, they succeeded. Through blade, shield, and magic, an old god was defeated. Few mortals could grasp the sheer magnitude of the victory inside Ankh-Kirash. Even the dragon aspects who had lived for so long did not truly understand how dangerous it had been to challenge Cthulhu. The triumph of Azeroth's defenders was a warning to the remaining old gods. When mortals joined forces, they were strong enough to overcome them. The Ashbringer. Far from Silithus, the scourge still held sway over the fallen kingdom of Lordaeron. The toxic plague lands were rife with shambling undead, deadly poisons, and the vengeful spirits of those claimed by recent years of violence. Two opposing groups of paladins remained focused on eradicating the Lich King's influence. The Scarlet Crusade was growing ever more belligerent and corrupt, restoring the brutal tactics against anyone who dared to question its members' methods. But as they prosecuted their ceaseless war, another order of paladins grew in strength and determination. The Argent Dawn was founded by those who were sickened by the Scarlet Crusade, but had refused to give up their holy mission of protecting Azeroth. One of the newest recruits to the Argent Dawn was Darion Morgraine, the youngest son of the late Alexandros Morgraine. His father's death had left Darien shaken. It was not the scourge that had sealed Alexandros' doom, but his own blood. Darien's brother, Renault Morgraine, had fallen to darkness and murdered their father. For a time, Darien had questioned his faith in the Holy Light, but recent events had renewed his hope. He had learned that Alexandros' spirit was held captive inside the floating scourge necropolis of Naxxramas. When Darien joined the Argent Dawn, he asked them to aid him in his quest to free his father's tortured soul. Many volunteered to help, and together, they made a daring assault on the well-defended fortress. Darien and his allies faced some of the Lich King's most notable minions, including the fearsome Four Horsemen. The leader of the horsemen was no other than Alexandros Morgraine, raised from the grave as a Death Knight. Nearly all of the Argent Dawn's party perished in the fighting. Darien barely managed to defeat his father and escape with his life. Against all odds, he had reclaimed the Ashbringer, the holy weapon that had earned his father renown across the land. After Alexandros' death, the blade had been corrupted to the Lich King's cause. Darien could hear someone speak to him from the Ashbringer, and to his shock, he realized that it was the voice of his father. His spirit was trapped inside the weapon, and he was desperate for a way out. Darien obeyed his father's wishes and sought out Renault Morgraine. As the two estranged brothers came face to face, Alexandros' spirit erupted from the Ashbringer and beheaded Renault in an act of justice. But whatever satisfaction Alexandros Morgraine felt did not release him from his curse. He was still trapped. Finally, Darien sought out Tyrion Fordring, an old war hero who lived in exile. Tyrion knew of the Ashbringer's legacy, and he was distraught to see how it had been corrupted. Yet, there was no easy means to cleanse it. The only way to break the curse and free the soul trapped within was to perform an act of compassion greater than the treachery that had defiled the weapon. Darien nearly fell to despair. He did not know what Tyrion meant. He returned to the Argent Dawn and joined them in the Light's Hope Chapel in the Plaguelands. An army of Scourge was mounting an offensive against the holy site. Though the Argent Dawn was greatly outnumbered, Darien stood with them on the front lines. The battle for Light's Hope Chapel was a desperate last stand. If the Argent Dawn failed, the Scourge would claim the consecrated ground and all the righteous souls who had been laid to rest there. The tide of battle soon turned against the chapel's defenders. It was then that Darien Morgraine finally understood Tyrion's words. His father had died due to betrayal. The only act that could free him was to make the ultimate sacrifice. And if Darien could free him, then perhaps Alexandros Morgraine could save the Argent Dawn from annihilation. Darien took the corrupted Ashbringer and impaled himself upon it. This selfless act did more than free his father. The souls interred beneath the chapel were also awakened. Alongside Alexandros, their vengeful fury laid waste to the invading Scourge. Light's Hope Chapel was saved, but many had fallen. Some, including Darien, were recovered by the Scourge. Though he had saved his father's soul, he had damned his own. Both Darien Morgraine and the Ashbringer were now in the Scourge's hands. Shadow of the Necropolis. The Scourge's defeat at Light's Hope Chapel did not trouble the Lich King. His agents had been watching the Horde and the Alliance. Recent conflicts in Ankiraj and the other parts of the world had weakened both factions. Though the bulk of his armies was still in Northrend, he believed he had an opportunity to strengthen his position in Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms. Without warning, the Lich King unleashed his necropoly. The floating fortress appeared over several regions of Azeroth and terrorized the local populations. The Argent Dawn sent word that the Scourge's power was concentrated in Naxxramas, the best defended of all necropoli. Home to the Lich Kel'Thuzad and other mighty undead, it loomed over the Plaguelands. Bolvar Fordragon recruited scores of Alliance heroes to assault Naxxramas. The twisted creatures that roamed the necropolis proved to be nearly insurmountable foes. The Alliance champions faced plagued abominations, a monstrous frostworm, and the Scourge's most powerful Death Knights. Finally, they confronted Kel'Thuzad, and the Lich unleashed all his power upon them. By the end, Kel'Thuzad fell. The Alliance had succeeded in stopping the Scourge's short-lived invasion. Though they could not destroy Naxxramas itself, none dared stay inside the fortress. It soon began drifting back to Northrend. With his last breath, Kel'Thuzad promised that he would return, more powerful than ever. They were not idle words. The Unraveling of Time. 10,000 years ago, a group of mortals had joined together with the powerful wild gods to drive back the Burning Legion's invasion. It was a long, drawn-out war, filled with incredible victories, shocking betrayals, and heartbreaking sacrifices. For creatures who could traverse the time-ways like the bronze dragonflight, such a momentous period of history drew a great deal of attention. It was common for them to quietly observe the War of the Ancients in detail, for there always seemed to be new acts of heroism to witness. But as the Bronze Dragon studied the War of the Ancients, they discovered that some parts of the history were changing. At first, these anomalies were subtle, but they became more drastic, even to the point that the Burning Legion seemed to have won the war. Nosdormu, the aspect of time, could not see what force was corrupting the timeways, and that alarmed him greatly. Since he could not discern what was altering history from the outside, Nosdormu dispatched 3 heroes into the past to make sure events played out correctly. They were the human mage Ronan, the red dragon Korlurstras, and Broxigar, an orc veteran of the First, Second, and Third Wars. The 3 time-lost champions joined the Night Elf resistance and mounted a defense against the Legion to ensure that the demons were defeated. In the final battle, when events seemed to spiral out of control, Broxigar leapt through the Burning Legion's portal to Azeroth, slaughtering countless demons. He died on Argus, the Legion's seat of power, while challenging Sargeras himself. After their mission was complete, Nosdormu returned Ronan and Korlurstras to the present. The sanctity of the timeways had been upheld, but it would not be the last time that anomalies would appear in history. Nosdormu became obsessed with unraveling the mystery of what, or who, was responsible. He disappeared into the timeways and would not be seen again for years. Timeway corruption. In all known realms of the cosmos, time flows forward, ever forward. Chaotic energies in places like the twisting nether can affect how quickly it flows, but it only flows forward. Once an event happens, it cannot be changed. These events and choices, made up of all creatures and forces in the cosmos, join together like a river, sharing the same reality. Different choices and different possibilities naturally spin off the river of time, like small creeks and estuaries, ebbing and flowing for a while. If these shades of what could have been are left alone, they will eventually dissipate into nothing. If efforts are made to preserve them, or alter them, they can indeed remain in existence indefinitely. They can even be made to feed back into the main river. Dead creatures can seemingly live again, and the past, or future, may literally come back to haunt you. This is not a natural phenomenon, and its inhabitants of the main timeway will often find these experiences to be quite alarming. But the only timeway that has a permanent effect on the cosmos is the main timeway. Creatures like the bronze dragons, who have command of temporal magic, can see all the countless tributaries of alternative universes and timelines, and they can even move back and forth along the stream to observe the past and the future. If that main river is disrupted, it could spell doom and disaster. All life on Azeroth depends on time to flow ever forward. Without the surety that that sun will rise and set each day, the seasons would not pass. The cycle of life would become meaningless, and all living creatures would eventually die from being unable to sustain themselves. It is the most sacred mission of the Bronze Dragonflight to keep that from happening.